You know, boxing today, it seems like there's news breaking every single day. There's fights being announced almost every day, big fights at that. Boxing's in a good place. And sometimes, I don't know about you guys, but I find it a little bit difficult at times just to stay on top of everything between checking Twitter, checking boxing scene, going on BoxRec to see if there's anything announced. There's a lot to look for. There's a lot of platforms you need to go on. And if you look there on screen, you'll see today's sponsors, Boxing Showtimes. They've made an app that does it all for you. Look at that on screen. It shows you where you can get tickets. It gives you all the latest news. It gives you the tail of the tape. It gives you all the card details. It's going to give you details about Fury Usyk. It's going to give you details about Joshua Ngannou. It's also going to have a lot more little things thrown in there as well. The link is in the comment section. It's going to be pinned on this video and more besides soon enough. And not only that, in the comment section, there's also going to be a link, a G-Man promo, which means you can access a little bit more without ads. Now that, to quote Eddie Hearn, is a game changer. Now let's crack on with the video. Alright, so this Friday we have Anthony Joshua versus Francis Ngannou. And on the undercard of that fight, we have a fight that honestly, like, on any given show, is a main event, no questions asked. It's a main event, no questions asked. Not even, no issues, right? It's the co-main on this card, which has a lot of really good fights on it, but this is the co-main. And for a lot of people are looking forward, more forward, I should say, to this than they are the main event. At least some people are, because they see the main event as a bit of a gimme fight for Anthony Joshua. You know, not everyone, but I'd say a majority see it as a bit of a gimme fight. And a lot of people are looking at this fight saying, do you know what? They're struggling. They really are. There's a lot of people who are, you go and you look at BDA and people like that who do, as I said in my previous video on Anthony Joshua, a lot of polls on who do you think will win, this, that, and the other. You go to some, they think the majority will think Park will win. You go to some, you think the majority seem to think Zhang will win. It's a real kind of 50-50 type of fight. Certainly on paper, a lot of people would see it as a 50-50 fight. Now, we'll talk over the tail of the tape real quick, and then we'll talk about as well how we got to this moment. So Joseph Parker is the younger man of the two. He's 32 years old, from New Zealand, but now residing in Morecambe. He actually trains, I think, in Dunleary, on the south side of Dublin. Now, south side of Dublin is especially Dunleary, is quite, well, it's not far, but it's the other side of Dublin. I'm from the north side. But he trains sometimes in Dunleary when he's not in camp in Morecambe. So we split his time between the south side of Dublin, which is lovely, it is, and Morecambe, Lancashire, in the United Kingdom. Originally from South Auckland, New Zealand. He's been about 3 years now. He's been coming over here since his fight with Junior Fa back in February 2021. He's been back basing himself out of Ireland and the UK. So he brings to the table, I should say, a record of 34 wins, 3 defeats, with 23 big wins coming by way of knockout. He's 6'4" tall, with a 76-inch reach, which is somewhat short for a heavyweight, even of his stature, and as I said, 32 years of age. Now, Zhilei Zhang, he brings to the table a professional record of 26 wins, 1 defeat, and 1 draw. The sole loss was to Filip Hrgovic, and the draw was to Jerry Forrest, around about the same time 3 years ago. He's 21 big KOs in those 26 wins, and he is 40 years old. His reach is not listed on BoxRec. He's a southpaw, and he's 6'6" tall. He is the bigger of the two, and he will be the bigger of the two, certainly in terms of weight, when you see some of the weights that Zhilei Zhang is weighed in at. And bear in mind, he's not necessarily the body beautiful type, but he's not a fleshy, fat heavyweight at the same time. His last fight was a win in the OVO Arena against Joe Joyce, where he weighed 287 pounds. A very big man. At 40 years old, some would say he's maybe not in his athletic peak anymore, certainly not at 40 years old, but he seems to be having the prime years of his career now, again, at the age of 40 years old. He also brings to the table the WBO interim heavyweight title, which means that he will be mandated sooner rather than later, provided he keeps winning, for the winner of Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk. How do we get here? Well, it involves Joe Joyce for both men. Now, Joe Joyce fought Joseph Parker in
December of 2022. At the time, if you had said Joe Joyce is a heavyweight, where would you put him? A lot of people would have put him in the top five. I think certainly after the Joseph Parker performance, a lot of people would have confidently had him in the top five. He was then mandatory for Alexander Usyk. He was interim WBO champion. He looked set to challenge eventually Alexander Usyk for that title. Now, being mandatory champion, but having to wait your turn, it means that you can, you have a certain semblance of freedom. You don't have the responsibility of being a champion. You can kind of pick and choose your fights respectfully. You can pick and choose them. You can say, look, I might fight a lesser known touch or whoever. Joe Joyce didn't do that. After he beat Joe Parker, he went straight back out in April and he fought Zhilei Zhang. A very strange move. Certainly when I seen it, I was happy in one sense, but I was looking at it, from a matchmaking point of view, thinking, oh boy, that could go wrong fairly quick. That's not the type of fight you take when you have a guaranteed crack at a world title. It's not the type of fight you take unless there's a mad big incentive, which there wasn't, because Zhilei Zhang, coming in off the back of a loss, a controversial loss in many people's eyes, was a real head scratcher. Again, I was looking forward to it, but I was thinking that could go wrong fairly quick, and it did. Went badly wrong. Joe Joyce was hurt in that fight. It took place at the Copper Box. He was hurt. He ultimately got stopped on an eye injury, and then they announced a rematch, an immediate rematch, and Zhilei Zhang, he just had an easy time in that rematch. And Joseph Parker, on the other hand, who lost that fight, clearly it was the first stoppage loss of his pro career, and he was taking a beating at times in that fight. He regrouped, signed with Boxer, fought Jack Massey, a cruiserweight, didn't look particularly good in it. Fought in his native New Zealand then. It was Melbourne, Australia he fought. I had to check there. He fought a guy who was 15-3 in his native, in Melbourne, Australia, not in his native New Zealand, because they're still quite far apart. They're about 2,000 miles apart, Australia and New Zealand. Fought him, got a first round knockout, then made his first appearance in Saudi Arabia. He fought Simon Keane, who went into the ring with a record of 21-1, or 23-1, I should say, sorry. And yeah, on paper, that's not a bad record. And then you seen him fight and you were like, oh, yeah, he's, well, if you'd seen him fight before, you would know. Nothing to write home about. Joseph Parker, able to let his hands go. Never really had an issue getting stoppages and knockouts when the opponent is that lesser opponent. Always was seemingly able to do it then. It was only when he stepped up, he was found wanting. Certainly in the, I don't want to say heart department, he showed plenty of heart, but that killer instinct, to grab the bull by the horn, he never seemed to be able to do that. Then it was announced after that fight, he would be fighting Deontay Wilder on the Day of Reckoning card just before Christmas. And, well, Christmas quite literally came early because Joseph Parker put on a very good performance, a very disciplined, measured, calm performance, but he stepped on the gas when he needed to. And Deontay Wilder, I don't want to take away from Joseph Parker, I don't think I am, but Deontay Wilder, I just could not believe what I was seeing. The fight, everything just gone out of Deontay Wilder. Joseph Parker, on one judge's scorecard, Steve Gray, he didn't even lose a round. So this was a very straightforward win for Joseph Parker, and it catapulted him back into contention. So it's bizarre because Joe Joyce was the guy who started all this, and he's now fighting in Birmingham and not even main eventing. And these two have fought Joe Joyce. One has beaten him, one has lost. They are fighting in the co-main of a massive show in Saudi Arabia, probably making at 7 figures, definitely. And it just goes to show how strange things can be in boxing. When you look at Joe Parker's record over the since that Joe Joyce lost, the thing that jumps out at you is that, yes, the competition, with the exception of Wilder, has not been incredible, but he's active. This is his 5th fight since January last year. 5 fights in the calendar year for someone of Joseph Parker's caliber, who is, even after he lost to Joe Joyce, many would have still had him in the top 10. It shows that you can come back quite quickly and you can get your confidence back quite quickly if you just stay active. Doing a Deontay Wilder, losing badly to Tyson Fury twice, and then having one competitive round in 2 years, it just doesn't do. It just doesn't do. You're best off just going and doing something like what Joseph Parker and Anthony Joshua have done, which is stay active. You might not be fighting the greatest, but you're not really you're not selling these fights as competitive necessarily. You're building your confidence back, And ultimately, it paid dividends in the end for Joseph Parker. With Zhilei Zhang, you know, a lot of people, I know Ade would even, I think, even argue that you could put Zhilei Zhang as number 3 heavyweight in the world, because in Ade's opinion, he beat Filip Hrgović. In the opinion of a lot of people, he beat Filip Hrgović in that fight. And if you look, if you'd given the win to Zhilei Zhang, if Zhang had got that win, then he would have Filip Hrgović, he would have 2 wins over Joe Joyce, and potentially a win over Joseph Parker if he beats him this coming Friday. That's extremely impressive. That's impressive. If that is the case, you know, that record is probably better than Deontay Wilder's record as a champion. It's really impressive stuff. Zhilei Zhang is a very, very strange fighter for me, because I'd seen him through the years, and yeah, you could see he had punching power. I mean, that was just, yes, he had punching power. But he never really looked like someone who would threaten the upper echelons of the heavyweight division. He never, for me, certainly he didn't. Against Jerry Forrest, I know he had, subsequently it emerged he had issues going into that fight. I think it was the kidneys or something. But he looked so devastating early on. And Jerry Forrest normally is durable. He looked so devastating early on, and then he faded so spectacularly. And even against Filip Hrgović, started well early on, was piecing Hrgović up in that fight, and, you know, he looked very good. And then he faded. You know, the stamina left. He started to fade. A lot of people wonder if Joe Joyce had been let to carry on, how would it have gone? I tend to suspect Joe Joyce would have probably lost, but you never know. And by the time the rematch came around, I mean, you know, that was it, really. I mean, Zhilei Zhang was just like, I know what I got to do. And he did it. Simple as. So he's been a fighter who, earlier on in his career, he didn't look amazing. Like, he set the world alight. And now he's 40 years old. And he's a very dangerous, very, very dangerous heavyweight. Joseph Parker looked very good early on in his professional career. I certainly thought he did. And, you know, he showed hand speed. He was lighter back then. He was able to move a bit more. And he showed some punching power. He did. And then he fought Carlos Takam in 2016. And I always look at that fight and say, that's really when something changed with Joseph Parker. Because he gassed quite bad. I think it was the 8th or 9th round in that fight. Came through it and ultimately won. But he seemed to lose that killer instinct from then on in. And he only really seemed to get it when he knew, all right, this is easy. I'm going to get this. And he had some very, very lackluster performances. And in many ways, I look back at the Joe Joyce fight and I think that knockout loss could have been the best thing that ever happened to him. Because even in defeats to Joshua and Dillian Whyte, he seemed almost happy in himself to just have been there. You know, that you seen the interview after the Dillian Whyte fight and he's like, wow, I'm so happy. It's like, mate, you just lost. You shouldn't be happy. Especially a very, very close fight like that. You should be devastated. He just looked happy to be there. Against Joe Joyce, a fight where he did come, he did try, he did land shots. He ultimately got taken out. Maybe that was the wake-up call. In a sense, maybe Joe Joyce actually knocked Joseph Parker into reality in many ways. Because since then, he seems a different fighter. He seems a lot more reassured, a lot more confident. Against Deontay Wilder, I could understand why you wouldn't really want to let your hands go against Deontay Wilder if you're onto a winner with what you're doing, because you just don't want to take a risk against someone like that who can literally clock you out like that. So I can kind of understand why he kind of just, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, so to speak, against someone that dangerous. I can kind of get that, to be honest with you. Just don't make a mistake and you're home free. That was the case. Going into this fight, Joe Parker has a lot of confidence. He's got an 8-year youth advantage. He's 8 years younger. He is the faster guy. I wonder how much will he weigh, but he is the faster guy. And I look back. Here's the thing people don't talk about that Zhilei Zhang Joe Joyce rematch. Joe Joyce in that first round, go back and look at that. He won that first round in the rematch. In a fight that was easier for Zhilei Zhang. Joe Joyce won that first round. He won it on the jab. He just kept away from Zhang. Zhang didn't do much, didn't push the action in the first round. But then in the second round, he started landing. And once he landed on Joe Joyce, it was like the demons of that first fight just came and stopped Joe Joyce dead in his tracks. It reminded me a bit of Josh Warrington, Mauricio Lara, the rematch, because Josh Warrington started that fight quite well too. First round, he was doing all right. He was using his feet, he was moving. And then he got hit with a few shots. And it was like all those demons just come whoosh, back. And it stops you in your tracks. The game plan goes out the window and you're like, you're back to that moment. That was what it was like for Joe Joyce. Joe Parker doesn't have that experience. And I think he'll know that, okay, I'm the faster of the two. Zhang is not exactly the quickest heavyweight in the world, but you want to be very, very careful. If I can move around the ring, if I can make him miss, If he's falling short, I can, even if I just land counters here and there, I'll be able to pick up rounds. Or even if I'm not necessarily picking up the rounds, if I'm keeping my name in the hat for these rounds, if they're not one-sided, later on, Zhilei Zhang has a tendency to slow down. I mean, why wouldn't he? He's a very big man. He's 6'6", and I've seen him in person. He is massive. This guy is like, damn. This guy is big, big, big. He may slow down. In fact, I think he probably will. He's carrying nearly 300 pounds. All right. So that will take it out of you regardless who you are, unless you're Jarrell Miller in 2018, in which case you're all right. But we all know what was happening there. So I think that's going to be Parker's plan, to get this fight into the second half. For Zhilei Zhang, I think his fight is going to be, don't let this fight get into the second half. Get rid of Joseph Parker early, or at the very least, do what I did against Jerry Forrest, albeit without the issues, and build up points, build up that lead, that even if I do tend to slow down late on in this fight, I've built up enough of a cushion that I'm okay. When you look at his fight against Hrgovic, how sharp he was early, the left hands, and God knows Filip Hrgovic has some chin to be able to take those left hands from Zhilei Zhang, because this guy's power is insane. I mean, that left hand may be the single hardest heavyweight shot, with the exception of Wilder's right hand whenever he lets it go, because that left hand is no joke. And now, in the Joe Joyce fight, we know that Zhilei Zhang has a tremendous right hook, because it was a right hook that knocked out Joe Joyce. It wasn't even the left hand. So Joe Parker needs to be doubly careful. He's in there with a guy who is technically a lot better than Deontay Wilder. He might not be as fast, but he is a lot better. He'll let those shots go. He can hit you with either hand and knock you out with either hand. So Joe Parker's going to want to be extra careful. He's going to want to use his strengths, which is his speed. His foot speed when he's in the 230s, really, not even the 240s, is good. When he's heavy, it's not good. And I don't like seeing a heavy Joe Parker. I like seeing a lighter Joe Parker, because I think that's when he has everything. He has a bit more power, a bit more speed in the hand and the foot, and he can do a lot more. And I think that he'd be well advised, Andy Lee, to do that in this fight. Come in a bit lighter, use your footwork, use your hand speed. Whenever he's missing, whenever he's coming forward, whenever the punches are missing you, take a step in, land a combination, get the hell out of dodge, reset, or if he's looking to set himself, make him reset. Use your footwork, use your legs to keep the slower footed, because he is much slower. Zhilei Zhang thinking, have him second guessing, and I think you'd be okay. Having said that, Joe Parker, when it comes to pressure, when it comes to keeping an opponent off him, we saw against Joe Joyce went full-blown juggernaut against Joe Parker. There was nothing he had that really was able to keep Joe Joyce off him. I'm not necessarily saying Zhilei Zhang is the same. I think Zhilei Zhang can be hurt. He has been down in his career, but I do worry for Joseph Parker if he hits Zhilei Zhang and Zhilei Zhang is like, okay, I can take that, try this, what might happen? Because again, Joseph Parker has been knocked out badly by Joe Joyce. We've not seen that chin get touched once since then. So when it does get tested and when it does get hit by Zhilei Zhang, which I think is inevitable in this fight, to be honest with you, how will he react? Because again, you see fighters when they've been in that situation, when they have been knocked out bad, when they have been, in a fight where they've taken a beat, they might not be in there against the same opponent, but they might be in there and they might take a shot, and it brings them back to that moment where it's like, oh crap, I remember being in, I think it was in Manchester, when I got knocked out in front of everyone and it hurt, I took a beating. Could those demons come back for Joe Parker? Because again, he hasn't taken a solid shot since that Joe Joyce fight. It's been fairly one-way street from fairly easy goings for Joseph Parker. It's a fight that I've really gone back and forth with. I've really struggled with, to be honest with you. I've looked at it and I've thought, I could make a case for Parker winning. I could make a case for Zhang winning. I really don't know which way to go. But I don't like sitting on the fences at the same time. I don't want someone to watch this video and be like, well, he's not made a pick. I have to give a pick on this fight. I'm compelled to give a pick on this fight. And my pick for this fight will be a stoppage win. I think we'll see a knockout. And I think we'll see Zhilei Zhang stopping Joseph Parker in between rounds 8 to 10. I'm going to go with Zhilei Zhang to win it by stoppage. If I was a betting man, I would be looking at late stoppage or potentially points, because I think that it could go to points as well. But I'm going to go with Zhilei Zhang to stop Joseph Parker. But again, I say that with no great degree of certainty, because I really do look at this fight as a real, true 50-50 fight. It could go either way. So that's my thoughts on it. Let me know yours in the comments below. What do you think? Who do you have? Joseph Parker, Zhilei, Zhang? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'm going with Zhang to win, probably by stoppage. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed it, people. Smash the like button if you could. Subscribe, of course, as always, if you haven't already. And for now, I'll leave it there. Peace.